Sony is about to drop two huge cameras in July, and fans have waited years for both. The Sony RX10V is arriving in early July, and it's followed later in the month by the Sony FX5, a new addition to Sony's cinema line. Both cameras have been talked about for years, and now it looks like the wait is finally over. Here's everything we know so far about what's coming. Let's start with the camera that's been on everyone's wish list for almost a decade. The Sony RX10 IV came out back in 2017, and since then, the RX10 line has basically gone quiet. That's a long time for any camera to go without an update, especially one that so many travel and wildlife shooters swear by. The RX10 series has always had a simple pitch: one camera, one lens, and a zoom range wide enough to shoot a landscape and a bird in the same afternoon without ever swapping glass. It's the kind of camera you throw in a bag and forget about until you need it, and then it just works. Now, reports point to July 9th as the day Sony finally announces the RX10V. Interestingly, there are two very different stories floating around about what's actually inside it, and they don't agree with each other. One version says Sony is giving the camera a real overhaul, with a brand new 20.1 megapixel stacked 1-inch sensor, the same Zeiss 24 to 600mm f 2.4 to 4 lens the series is known for, and Sony's newer BIONZ XR2 processor doing the image processing. If that's accurate, you'd be looking at burst shooting up to 24 frames per second, video at 4K 60p, and even 4K 120p. A sharp OLED viewfinder, and a tilting 3-inch screen. That's basically Sony taking everything people loved about the RX10 IV and bringing the internals into 2026. The other version tells a much simpler story. According to this rumor, Sony is keeping the same sensor and the same lens from the RX10 IV, and the update is mostly about the processing chip getting faster and the autofocus getting smarter, along with support for Sony's newer NPF-Z1000 battery. Basically, a light refresh rather than a full redesign. It's an odd situation to have two rumors pulling in such different directions, but that's where things stand right now. Either way, expect the RX10V to land somewhere between $1,899 and $1,999. One thing that makes this launch feel overdue is what's happening to the RX10 IV on the used market. With no successor for 9 years, prices on the outgoing model have actually climbed instead of dropped. It's currently going for around $3,295 on Amazon with barely any stock left, which is nearly double its original $1,698 launch price. That tells you just how much pent-up demand there is for this camera to come back. The timing also isn't random. Sony launching the RX10V right after Amazon Prime Day means anyone who almost pulled the trigger on an overpriced RX10 IV during the sale now has a very good reason to wait a couple more weeks. It also fits a bigger pattern happening across the camera industry this year, with brands like Canon bringing back their PowerShot line and manufacturers generally rediscovering that people still want a great all-in-one camera that doesn't require carrying 3 lenses. The FX5 brings a global shutter to Sony's cinema line. While the RX10V is exciting on its own, the bigger headline might actually belong to the FX5. This one is expected to land in mid to late July, right after the RX10V announcement, and it slots into Sony's cinema line between the compact FX3 and the larger FX6. For context, the FX3 has been a favorite among filmmakers since 2021, shooting 4K up to 120 frames per second off a 10.2 megapixel full-frame sensor. If the FX5 rumors hold up, it's about to leap well past that. The standout feature being talked about is a global shutter sensor. For anyone not deep into video specs, this matters because a global shutter gets rid of that warped, jello-like distortion you sometimes see when a rolling shutter camera pans quickly or films something moving fast. It's a feature usually reserved for much more expensive cinema cameras, so seeing it show up in this part of Sony's lineup would be a big deal. Specifically, the rumor is a new 16-megapixel fully stacked global shutter sensor capable of recording 5K video at up to 240 frames per second, along with 5K open gate recording in a 3:2 aspect ratio. Open gate is especially useful for creators who need to reframe footage for both horizontal and vertical platforms without losing quality, which makes a lot of sense given how much content today gets repurposed for shorts and reels. On top of that, the camera is said to feature full sensor phase detection autofocus, which would be a meaningful upgrade in tracking accuracy over the FX3. There's a small wrinkle in all of this too. One well-known leaker referred to this same camera as the FX4 rather than the FX5, so there's genuine uncertainty about what Sony will actually call it when it's announced. Whether it ends up being FX5 or FX4, the specs being described point to the same camera, and it sounds like a serious jump for the cinema line either way. There's also a mention of a possible new lens accompanying the launch, though details on that are thin, so treat it as a side note for now rather than a confirmed pairing. What makes July interesting isn't just that two cameras are coming, it's that they're aimed at completely different audiences and both have been waiting a long time for an update. The RX10V speaks to travel shooters, wildlife photographers, and anyone who wants one camera that does everything without the hassle of switching lenses. The FX5 speaks to filmmakers and video creators who want cinema-level image quality without stepping all the way up to the FX6's size and price. Sony announcing both in the same month, back-to-back, feels like a deliberate move to make a splash and remind everyone that its lineup is still evolving on every front, not just the mainstream alpha bodies people usually talk about. Nothing here is official yet, since Sony hasn't confirmed either camera itself, but the sourcing behind both rumors has been consistent and detailed enough that most of the camera community is treating this as close to certain. If the July 9th date holds for the RX10V, we won't have to wait long to find out which version of the specs turns out to be true. And if the FX5's global shutter rumor pans out, it could end up being one of the more talked about cinema camera releases of the year. The Sony RX10V is for people who want one camera that just handles everything. Think travel shooters, wildlife photographers, and anyone who hates swapping lenses mid-trip. With its fixed 24 to 600mm zoom, it's the grab-and-go option for landscapes 1 minute and distant birds the next, all in a single body. The Sony FX5 is aimed at filmmakers and serious video creators. With a rumored global shutter, 5K video, and open gate recording, it's built for people who need cinema-quality footage and clean motion during fast pans, without jumping all the way up to the bulkier, pricier FX6. So if you're choosing, RX10V suits stills-first hybrid shooters who value convenience and reach. FX5 suits video-first creators who need pro-level footage and flexible reframing for both landscape and vertical content. Two very different tools, two very different audiences.